Reconsider News sets to look at topics without preconceived ideas defined by mainstream scientific or news sources. We view mainstream as a control system, and as a result needs to be questioned at every juncture. Everyone should reevaluate their belief systems, their history, culture, technology. All facets of life need to be reconsidered. Reality isn't what we've been told. You won't find any conclusions with these videos, but hopefully will spark a flame of passion and curiosity that drives you to view concepts and reality from all angles and come to your own conclusions. So onwards, upwards, to the moon. Reports started to surface recently across the mainstream media of a deep structure hidden underneath the surface of the moon. On the 10th of June 2019, Futurism.com stated in the article titled, "Astronomers discover deep structure under the moon's largest crater," quote, "A team of astronomers found a large excess of mass under the moon's largest crater, the Atkin Basin, likely a relic from an ancient asteroid impact event, but perhaps something more stranger. Imagine taking a pile of metal 5 times larger than the big island of Hawaii and burying it underground," said lead author Peter B. James from Bayer University in Waco, Texas, in a statement. "That's roughly how much unexpected mass we detected." This story's actually been around since 2014, but the research and resultant coverage has been revised recently. Of course, the mainstream has never entertained the idea of it being anything else apart from a natural meteorite. An interesting aspect to the anomaly is the rectangular form, which is relatively unusual for a natural formation and for a chaotic impact for a meteor. Increasingly within the Western media, there's been a noticeable shift in the reporting of UFOs and disclosure, and the acknowledgement of US-based governmental bodies researching this phenomenon. The reasons why suddenly information is being slowly drip-fed now into the public needs to be seriously considered. Unfortunately, we have to view these actions with real suspicion and the motives behind it. So what do we know about the moon, both from the mainstream sense, esoteric, and covert point of view? The moon's unique corresponding levels of light means we're able to view the surface of the moon in surprising detail. Craters and its luminescent grey dusty surface is easily visible by the naked eye. The moon profoundly influences our world physically, culturally, and spiritually. It defines and sets the motion of the tides, of rivers, seas, and the migration and mating rituals of animals. Pagans view the lunar body as a sign of fertility and femininity. Just as the moon influences the ebb and flow of the tides on a macro level, some have theorised the effect is the same in relation to the menstrual cycle of women, although this theory is hotly contested by mainstream science. So is the cycle of ovulation directly linked to the cycles of the moon? Women of all potentially have the closest relationship of all to the moon, down to the alleged intricate effects on their body. On a mental cerebral level, the moon is viewed by some to have a very potent effect on humanity's mood and emotional balance. In a BBC article dated the 29th of October 2013 called "Does a Full Moon Make People Mad?", quote, "Speak to police officers or staff in hospital emergency departments and some will insist there are more accidents, violent incidents and psychiatric admissions when the moon is full. In 2007, the police force in the British seaside resort of Brighton even went as far as to employ extra officers during full moons." The idea of the moon creating mental disharmony is deeply embedded within our culture, from music, art, and literature. In the play Othello by William Shakespeare, he wrote, "It's the very error of the moon. She comes more near the earth than she was wont, and makes men mad." This connection has even influenced the language and how we describe mental illness with the word lunatic or lunacy, which originates from the word Luna, the Roman goddess of the moon. The mainstream for the most part has rubbished the connection of the moon on human behaviour. But if on a basic level, when you view the overall body as nearly 60% water, and the human brain and heart specifically nearly 73% water, surely it is within the realms of possibility. For decades now, a combination of satellites consistently passing over the lunar surface, manned missions, and photography captured from high-powered telescopes back here on Earth has incubated much rumour and speculation by some if we are actually being told the truth about what the moon actually is, and if the moon's landscape is as lifeless and barren as we are led to believe. The internet is awash with alleged classified leaked photography of strange building-like structures that appear to litter the dark or far side of the moon, which coincidentally is the side that is never visible by us here on the Earth's surface. One of the earliest examples of this was back in 1953. An amateur astronomer claimed to have seen a bridge-like structure on the moon that was later confirmed by famous British astronomers, the late H.B. Wilkins and Sir Patrick Moore. Later on, the bridge was seen to disappear into the landscape, never to be seen again. In 1966, the Lunar Orbiter 2 managed to capture 6 tower-looking objects on the moon's surface, The shape and size meant it was hard to claim that it was a natural formation, and arguably more the result of intelligent design. William Blair, a Boeing anthropologist, highlighted the geometric relationship with each of the structures, and was quoted as saying, "If such a complex of structures were photographed on Earth, the anthropologist's first order of business would be to inspect and excavate test trenches, and thus validate whether the prospective site has archaeological significance. The towers in reality would be much taller than any other building that currently exists on Earth. The actual material of the towers appeared to be much lighter in colour, proving potentially it was built by a different material in comparison to what is predominantly found on the lunar surface." Sergeant Karl Wolff, who was showcased as a whistleblower for the 2001 Disclosure Project, which was headed up and partly organised by Dr. Stephen Greer. The Disclosure Project presented a huge array of military and industrial whistleblowers, presenting their experience and evidence to the National Press Club on the subject of UFOs, suppressed technology, and intelligent extraterrestrial life. In the video featured in the Serious Disclosure YouTube channel, part of Greer's organisation, Wolff explains that around the June and July of 1965, he was working as a photographic technician for the US Air Force with secret crypto clearance. On one particular workday, Wolff was sent over to the NSA facility in Langley, Virginia, to fix some faulty photographic equipment. He stated that photos taken by the lunar orbiter, which were captured prior to the Apollo landing in 1969, were shown to him. He described how he could clearly see bases or structures on the far side of the moon, detailing geometric shapes, towers, and spherical buildings. Interestingly, the alleged architecture that exists on the far side of the moon remains unseen by astronomers due to the hidden location. The moon is considered unique astronomically down to one side of the moon always facing the Earth, which you could argue coincidentally surrounds these structures away from our eyes. Mainstream science explains this effect as tidal locking, which is the result of the bulging effect of the tides, locking the very position of the moon to face Earth in this configuration. The Apollo mission to the moon is shrouded in a huge matrix conspiracy. The mainstream loves to ridicule curious minds who pose the question, did the moon landing actually even happen? From my own opinion, if we consider the period of time and the height of the Cold War, the propaganda and the prestige to present amazing imagery to the world, posturing that the US dominance and prowess on the world stage. There exists a heavy weight of evidence detailing strange shadows and angles of illumination, which if the sun was the only source of light, then the shadows within the photos don't really make any sense. Other anomalies include the lack of dust surrounding the astronauts' craft, which considering the impact should have left residue on the feet of the lander. Some researchers have also managed to adjust the contrast in some of the imagery, which has highlighted deliberate photographic manipulation and editing. My personal favourite inconsistency is the Hasselblad cameras the astronauts used, which are very awkwardly attached to their suits. They weren't able to look through the viewfinder of the camera, which meant it would be incredibly difficult to take accurately positioned photos. If you look through some of the imagery, they are aesthetically beautifully framed. Would these images have been possible given the equipment they had? Personally, I feel the moon landings did happen, but the footage that is so familiar to us, the photos and videos which document the famous event, it would be logical and prudent to consider if the footage was genuine. Were they fabricated, an exercise of propaganda, driven by covert US forces exerting the country's technological and cultural sophistication? Further adding to the conspiracy, many have drawn links to the late director Stanley Kubrick actually assisting the US in directing and producing the fake footage. Kubrick utilised some of the same technology on his epic production of 2001 A Space Odyssey. Kubrick strangely was provided a huge amount of creative and commercial freedom to develop whatever film he wanted. Considering Kubrick's films were long and meandering and not immediate commercial successes, this is an honour no other Hollywood filmmaker has ever had. Questions need to be asked: how and why is this the case? And does this add weight to the theory it was a payoff for the potential fake footage for humanity's first steps on the moon? But eventually, did Kubrick's flirtation with dark forces eventually cost him his life? He was reported to have had a fascination with covert dark ritual power. His fascination with these forces were explored in the final film, Eyes Wide Shut. Some have theorised it eventually sealed his fate with a death slightly after the film's release. Was this the final justice by the hidden hand for revealing too much of the truth? If, as mentioned earlier, potential architecture exists on the lunar surface, do these structures herald from an ancient civilization? Or is there a possibility some of these structures are actually still inhabited? On this possibility, it has been reported astronauts did in fact encounter UFOs whilst journeying to the moon. NASA contractor Donna Hare, who was also interviewed as part of the Disclosure Project, claimed from various sources that UFOs landed directly on the moon after the initial lunar landings. She also claims that it was in a restricted photo lab where she was exposed to classified photos of UFOs. Hare further claimed to have personally known staff who were in the room whilst astronauts were being debriefed and relaying their stories of UFOs whilst in space. It was also disclosed that NASA previously used the code word Santa Claus in describing UFO activity and interactions. This can be clearly heard on the audio captured from Apollo 8, which was launched on the 21st of December 1968.
Houston, Apollo 8, over. Hello, Apollo 8. Loud and clear. Roger. Please be informed there is a Santa Claus. That's affirmative. You're the best ones to know.
The UFO connection to the moon and the Apollo program was further confirmed by the late controversial secret space program insider William Tompkins, who in his book, Selected by Extraterrestrials, wrote about his extraordinary life in the covert world. At an early age, Tompkins' aptitude and photographic memory were recognised by the US Navy. He spent a lifetime drafting and eventually designing advanced rocket technology, and later the design of large spacecraft, utilised allegedly within the secret space program. During his experiences working directly designing and influencing the Apollo program, he described seeing video of large alien craft hovering over the lunar landing crater. Indeed, he even described extraterrestrial influence on the Apollo program itself. He claims much of his design ideas were telepathically gifted to him. Him and other members of the team considered some of the women that had actually worked on the program were actually Nordic extraterrestrials who had infiltrated the program to assist humanity. Tompkins went on to describe opposing negative ET influence that he and his colleagues were aware of, who were trying to counteract and derail humanity, sabotaging our future as an interstellar species to keep us imprisoned on Earth. Some may scoff at such outlandish information because this is so far removed from the mainstream narrative, but before he died he was interviewed on multiple occasions, all of which can be found readily available to watch, and ultimately you can decide for yourself if you're ready to believe. Secure Team 10, a popular YouTube channel that produces videos concerning high strangeness and UFO activity, reported on the 27th of November 2018, a phenomenon that has been widely documented by multiple other content creators on YouTube that's been collectively called lunar waves. This is the effect of a strange ripple that rhythmically rolls up the image of the moon when the HD cameras zoom into the detail of the lunar surface. Others around the world with differing camera equipment have reported exactly the same effect. Tyler, the author of Secure Team 10, reported that the YouTube channel Crow 777, which predominantly explores alternative news, had filmed exactly the same effect. As a result of the posting, YouTube shortly after disabled the entire channel, citing the lunar wave video as the reason. Eventually, after multiple appeals, the YouTube channel was reinstated. Given our mantra of question absolutely everything, humanity has been far too trusting of established platforms of information and failed to realise who the real controllers are. So even though it may seem ridiculous, some have speculated this indicates that the moon is merely a hologram, an illusion in the night sky. Or does it indicate something more sophisticated, masking technology which is hiding the true reality of the moon and its surface? Or is it just a naturally occurring optical effect that is simply unable to be explained? So given the very strange documented activity that surrounds the Earth's only moon, what is the mainstream view of our moon's origin? How did this object come into orbit around our planet? Well, there exist various speculated theories, none of them surprisingly are widely accepted. Capture theory considers that the moon was physically captured into orbit by a magnetic effect of the planet's gravity as the moon happened to be flying past. But some advise the sheer coincidence of such an event actually happening is quite minuscule. This theory is a likely explanation was further explored by Isaac Asimov, an American writer and professor of biochemistry at Boston University, who was quoted as saying, "What in blazes is our moon doing out there? It's too far out to be a true satellite of Earth. It's too big to be captured by the Earth. The chances of such a capture having been affected and the moon then having taken up nearly a circular orbit about the Earth are too small to make such an eventuality credible. But then, if the moon is neither a true satellite of the Earth nor a captured one, what is it?" A second alternative explanation for the moon's existence is called fusion theory. This examines the idea of a chunk of rock being cracked off the Earth to form the moon. Again, this theory has issues due to the lack of iron ore in the moon's centre, mirroring the geology of the Earth. Also, to lay further doubt, the substances held within the moon's rock suggest that the lunar crust has undergone a period of extra baking. which adds further uncertainty to the idea. A third popular theory is that the Moon and Earth were actually created at the same time. Again, there are major issues with this explanation, because indeed, if this was the case, the Moon's crust and geology would be as dense as the Earth's. There are many strange coincidences, idiosyncrasies that surround our Moon that make it incredibly unique and fuels much speculation over the actual true origins of the Moon and the very reason for its existence. Much of the following information spots some very deep questions over whether the Moon is actually even a natural entity. Sounds far-fetched, but let's dive into this as a credible potential. The Earth and the Moon stand as the largest example of a Moon-planet combination in our solar system. Going by conventional mainstream physics, the Earth in reality doesn't really have enough energy to capture the Moon. The gravity emitted is simply not strong enough. As previously mentioned earlier, the Moon also has a very peculiar orbit in which we only ever see one side of its surface. The reality of the Moon starts to become really interesting when we dive into the science of a total eclipse. This event is of course when the Moon completely covers the surface of the Sun from Earth, blocking out the majority of sunlight. During this event, the Moon and Sun appear to be exactly the same size. This is a huge coincidence, and the maths involved are rather startling. The Moon is exactly 1/400th the size of the Sun, and even more intriguingly is 1/400th the distance between Earth and the Sun. Coincidentally, the Moon's size and placement allows the Moon to perfectly cover the Sun during the advent of an eclipse, creating the dazzling, shining, magical corona effect. The dazzling bright thin rim that radiates around the edges of the Sun. There are so many huge coincidences in terms of its origins, continuing orbit, but also the science behind its interaction with the Earth. So could we consider the very wild idea that the Moon is in an artificial orbit as a result of intelligent design? The Moon's existence and placement has a very profound effect on the Earth. It has stabilised the Earth's weather patterns and stands as a catalyst why we have changing seasons, along with the catalyst for the fall and rise of tides, seas, lakes and rivers. Given its importance to the entire natural ecosystem, it's unbelievable to imagine that some US military chiefs, during the height of the Cold War, actually drew up plans to blow up the Moon with a nuclear bomb to demonstrate the US's military dominance. This was reported in the UK's independent newspaper in 2012. The article titled US Military Chiefs Plan to Blow Up the Moon with a Nuclear Bomb as a Show of Cold War Muscle, physicist claims. US military chiefs keen to intimidate Russia during the Cold War plotted to blow up the Moon with a nuclear bomb, according to the project documents kept secret for nearly 45 years. The Army chiefs allegedly developed a top-secret project called A Study of Lunar Research Flights, or Project A119, in the hope that their Soviet rivals would be intimidated by a display of America's Cold War muscle. According to the Sun newspaper, the military bosses developed a classified plan to launch a nuclear weapon 238,000 miles to the Moon, where it would be detonated upon impact. Considering the Earth-Moon paradigm manages to break all laws of conventional physics, and its very origin is still under question, it would be entirely sensible to consider some more alternative theories, such as questioning if the Moon is actually a naturally occurring celestial body. One of the first published ideas questioning the Moon as a natural entity was published in the Russian 1970s article in a journal called Sputnik. The title of the article, Is the Moon the Creation of Alien Intelligence?, was written by two Soviet scientists. If you'd like to research further into this subject, one of the more well-known books on the alternative origins of the Moon is Who Built the Moon by Christopher Knight and Alan Butler. So is it entirely plausible to pose the question, is the Moon the result of extraterrestrial intelligence? The Moon is peppered with craters. This was detailed beautifully on the YouTube channel, System Sounds, which added specific tones to represent each impact to the lunar surface over the span of thousands of millions of years, with larger craters carrying a deeper resonance. Looking at the craters in detail, many researchers have noted that the craters in the surface are very strange in their form. They are convex, flat, and very shallow. Their inherent shallow nature is very strange for such huge impacts. Essentially, there isn't enough matter being blasted out of the surface for it to be natural geology. Because of its unusual natural reaction to meteors, some Russian scientists even started to speculate that the Moon is actually a hollow entity, adding further weight to the artificial Moon theory. Again, can these seemingly wild theories by mainstream standards be anchored in reality and hold weight? To delve even more down the rabbit hole, some have even theorised that the moon is actually maybe even a viewing station, an artificial satellite placed to watch us, voyeurs of the Earth, watching our slow development as a species, and maybe even guiding or manipulating humanity to fit a particular agenda. During the Apollo program, which officially saw a multitude of astronauts visit the moon, on the various missions, astronauts permanently left seismometers on the lunar surface. From the data garnered by the scientists, they started to understand that the moon's crust was significantly a lot less dense than Earth's. NASA scientist Gordon MacDonald started to openly discuss that the moon was maybe even a hollow entity, or at the very least, a honeycomb sphere. These findings were firmly confirmed when the stage of the lunar module landed on the surface. The various seismometers rang for hours on the surface. The result was also repeated when the module blasted back into space after the completion of the mission. The famous British astronomer H.B. Wilkins also commented on the hollow nature of the moon. He stated the crust only went down as far as 20 to 30 miles deep. A scientist, Dr. Solomon of MIT University, further confirmed this theory as reality. Through his research, he eventually came to the conclusion that due to the unique gravitational fields of the moon, it likely means the moon is a hollow entity. The moon has influenced ancient cultures throughout the ages. Exploring their beliefs and oral histories provides us with the opportunity to really delve deep and understand our lunar body. In Graham Hancock's book, Fingerprints of the Gods, it was stated 35 different ancient tribes from around the world have the concept of a 26,000-year cycle encoded into their culture. In astrological terms, there are 12 zodiac signs. One zodiac sign equates to 2,160 years. So if you multiply the total number of 12 zodiacs by 2,160, it nearly equals the 26,000-year zodiac cycle. Interestingly, if we look at the diameter of the moon in miles, it just so happens to be 2,160 miles. So is this a strange coincidence or something more profound? A multitude of ancient cultures completely unconnected and positioned in many far-flung corners of the world have described a time before the moon. The Zulus in Africa saw the moon as a symbolic egg, a hollowed-out object which neatly ties into the hollow moon theory, which we discussed earlier. This links into spiritual concepts of the moon representing and symbolising femininity and fertility. The alternative archaeologist, thinker and author Michael Tellinger wrote an article featured on his website titled "A Time Before the Moon Was in the Sky." The period when the Earth was moonless is probably the most remote recollection of mankind. Democritus and Anaxagoras taught that there was a time when the Earth was without the moon. Aristotle wrote that Arcadia in Greece, before being inhabited by the Hellenes, had a population of Pelagians, and these aboriginals occupied the land already before there was a moon in the sky above the Earth. For this reason, they were called the Proselines. Apollonius of Rhodes mentioned the time when not all the orbs were yet in the heavens, before the Denai and Deucalion races came into existence, and only the Arcadians lived, of whom it is said they dwelt on mountains and fed on acorns before there was a moon. In an article written by Emanuel Velikovsky, he worked as an independent scholar and wrote a number of books on the ancient world history, the most famous being Worlds in Collision. He penned the following article, Earth Without a Moon. Velikovsky confirmed evidence for pre-lunar period of time humanity may have experienced from uncovered ancient texts. Plutarch wrote in Roman Questions, "There were Arcadians of Evander's following, the so-called pre-lunar people." Similarly wrote Ovdin, "The Arcadians are said to have possessed their land before the birth of Jove, and the folk is older than the moon." Hippolytus refers to the legend of Arcadia brought forth Pelagus of greater antiquity than the moon. Lucian, in his Astrology, says that the Arcadians affirm in their folly that they are older than the moon. Censorinus also alludes to the time in the past when there was no moon in the sky. Some allusions to the time before there was a moon may be also found in scriptures. In Job 25:5, the grandeur of the Lord, who makes peace in the heights, is praised, and the time is mentioned before there was a moon and did not shine. Also in Psalm 72:5, it is said, "Thou wast feared, since the time of the sun before the time of the moon. A generation of generations means a very long time." Of course, it is no use to counter this farm with the myth of the first chapter of Genesis, a tale brought down from exotic and later sources. In the sphere of astrology, in which people use various planetary alignments and movements to make future predictions and guide life decisions, the moon is seen as the second most important planetary body to affect ourselves. The sun defines and influences our personality, but the moon, according to some, has the power to directly influence our psyche on a profound level. The subject of astrology by the mainstream isn't taken seriously, but some view it as a real science with huge levels of complexity. The new moons and full moons have a quantifiable, predictable effect on us spiritually. As an example, if there is a full moon in Cancer between the 21st of June and the 22nd of July, it is expected to increase our self-confidence, generosity, and happiness. Then as the new moon approaches, it instigates self-reflection and contemplation of positive life changes. Or if the full moon moves into Leo on the 23rd of July to the 22nd of August, this sparks creativity, enthusiasm, and intense energy. The Leo new full moon represents new beginnings and new projects. So many view full moons as the catalyst for continual soul growth and fundamental to our journey within this reality. So the moon operates as a real positive force for growth and understanding. Some of the darker elements of the elite understand full well the power of astrology, and namely the moon. They even base their investments and life decisions on astrology. In a Forbes magazine article, Can Planets Affect Your Portfolio, dated the 20th of February 2012, they stated, JP Morgan once famously said that millionaires don't need astrologers, but billionaires do. Are we in charge of the economic matters on Earth, or are invisible forces out there shaping the economic and social outcomes of individual nations? JP Morgan thought there was more to the market than timing. He used astrologers to help guide him in timing, in business, and investments. Delving even deeper into the esoteric and covert worlds, and the moon's meaning and function, some perceive that the moon energetically is harbouring conscious unseen entities, which can be accessed and interfaced with during a full moon period, via the practice of white or black magic. Some view the moon as actually having a profound, heavy negative influence on humanity, with a pathogenic effect on people's consciousness, with some deliberately carrying out ceremonies attempting to conjure ancient evil that exists on the moon. Others believe the moon is instrumental in interfacing and creating a false reincarnation cycle in which souls are trapped by the moon after people pass over into the afterlife. George Gurdjieff, a Western mystic, was adamant people should avoid going near the moon after death due to the negative force driving souls into a false reincarnation prison-like cycle. Others consider that if a child is conceived on a full moon, the lunar energy actually influences the DNA of the child by spirits harboured within the moon. These children have been dubbed moon children. The view of this spiritual concept is highly polarised, with some viewing them as both positive and negative. So within the covert world, what are the views held concerning the existence of the moon and its role in our reality? An Exopolitics article written by former Geopolitics University academic Dr. Michael Saller, he penned an article on the 16th of March 2016 called Moon is Artificial and Arrived with Refugees from Destroyed Planet in Asteroid Belt. The first major scientist to seriously research the possibility the asteroid belt is the remains of a former planet is Dr. Thomas Van Flandern, who was the chief astronomer at the US Naval Observatory. He wrote several academic papers on what he described as the exploded planet hypothesis, which suggested that several asteroid belts in our solar system arose from the destruction of planets, stretching all the way back to the beginning of our solar system. Putting all this evidence together, we have strong hints for two original planets near what is now the main asteroid belt, hypothetical Planet V and Planet K. These were probably gas giant planets with moons of significant size, such as Mars before they exploded. We have hints of two more asteroid belts, probably from explosions of two more planets, Planet T and Planet X, beyond Neptune. And we have hints of two extra large gas giant planets, Planet A and Planet B, that exploded back near the solar system beginning. Van Flandern elaborated on his proposal that Mars was once a moon of a destroyed planet in the asteroid belt. The above summarises evidence that Mars was not an original planet, but rather a moon of a now exploded planet occupying the approximate orbit. Many of these points are now expected consequences of having a massive planet blow up nearby, thereby blasting the facing hemisphere and leaving the shielded hemisphere relatively unscathed. Especially significant in this regard is the fact that half of Mars is saturated with craters and half is only sparsely cratered. Moreover, the coastal thickness has apparently been augmented over one hemisphere and up to 20 kilometers or so, gradually tapering off near its hemisphere boundaries. The secret space program whistleblower Bill Tompkins, in his earlier days during World War II, would put together briefing packets to be sent to elite US military generals, which summarised the intelligence of US spies had garnered from their infiltration into the upper echelons of the Nazi military. Some of the information shocked and drew immediate ridicule from some of the generals because the intelligence pointed towards the Germans being in contact with interdimensional and extraterrestrial beings, and as a result developed sophisticated spacefaring technology. Tompkins' career lasted decades, and he himself at the time and others claim he was still maintained on the payroll of the US Navy, and in fact the information he was discussing had actually been sanctioned by the Navy itself. Given his credentials, Tompkins claims the moon isn't what people think it is. He stated in one interview, "It's not a planet, but a vehicle for a multitude of ET species, and in terms of ownerships, it's not humanity's moon at all. It's been purposely positioned and directed at our planet for a reason. The covert world perceives the moon as an ancient inhabited command center. Tompkins insinuates the majority of natural objects in space rotate. Moons that don't rotate with a similar tidal locked orbit to our moon are possibly also command centers." As a result of Tompkins' direct interaction with the Apollo space program, he went on to claim that during the official Apollo landing, the moon had a very strong visible ET presence. Their craft hovered over the landing crater as the astronauts landed for the first time. Hence why since the close of the Apollo program, there hasn't been an overt manned mission back to the moon that's been reported by the mainstream. We can expand on these potentially incredible revelations with the information from author David Wilcock, who he claims to have multiple insiders from the covert world. Wilcock, via his alleged extensive access to some of the most secretive information on the planet, has stitched together that actually the asteroid belt is the remnants of a super-Earth, which was destroyed during a sophisticated ancient intergalactic war. The ancient super-Earth Wilcock has stipulated had two moons, what we know as Mars and our current moon. After the devastating conflict, the super-Earth was left destroyed and the atmosphere of Mars severely compromised, damaged forever. Our moon, he stated, was set in orbit around the super-Earth and was actually operated as an interstellar vehicle with around 10,000 floors built within the sphere by sophisticated nanotechnology. The lunar vehicle acted as a Noah's Ark, helping to transport wildlife and intelligent beings to the safety of Earth after the conflict, to assist seeding our own planet. The moon was a balancing catalyst, stabilising the weather, and the creation of seasons balanced our Earth to be more environmentally conducive for life to flourish. Bill Tompkins also confirmed his hypothesis that the moon was a Noah's Ark, but some of his information slightly differed to Wilcock's. He claimed the moon was brought in deliberately to cause the death of the dinosaurs. Tompkins discussed how the dinosaurs were a rogue genetic program of reptilian beings. This action deliberately wiped out the dinosaurs and set the Earth biologically on a different genetic and spiritual path. The rabbit hole deepens, so buckle up. It gets stranger. It's Wilcock's view and some of his alleged insiders that the moon was actually used to store data on a galactic level of surrounding galaxies and other civilizations and sentient life. It's an epicenter of a kind of cloud computing. After the cataclysm that befell the ancient super-Earth and Mars, the souls of Mars' elite society were downloaded into the moon. It was their view this huge system was then later on infected by a galactic pathogenic artificial intelligence that was able to hack the moon, which feeds into the theory that the moon is now acting as a soul catcher. So given Wilcock's theories and understanding, does this make sense why people are so triggered and affected by the full moon, with its pathogenic AI, evil soul combination periodically telepathically affecting humanity? Again, it's his view, his insiders, and also other truth community researchers that it's humanity's pain, suffering, and violence that these parasitic souls rely on as food, called louche. Hence why subsections of society are pitched against each other, creating disharmony, and therefore creating energetic food for these unseen negative influences that prey on us all. Wilcock has further speculated this is why there is currently such a huge overwhelming force to push transhumanism and artificial intelligence on humanity, to potentially aid these downloaded souls to be eventually granted a 3D, highly sophisticated but mechanical form. I guess the only issue with this theory, if these negative extraterrestrials and they are so sophisticated, wouldn't they already be able to create or clone 3D biological or mechanical bodies to house these ancient souls without assistance of people? Why do they have to wait for the overt world of humanity to start producing mechanical avatars? Or is there an aspect of this information that I'm personally unable to understand? It brings into sharp focus that during times of the full moon or the recent solstice celebrations, some perform ceremonies and offerings, spiritually attempting to connect with the moon. But what in reality are these people really celebrating, interfacing with? Could it be an ancient form of AI, and for the elites, and the section of humanity devoid of compassion and empathy that grants them access to these negative entities through the use of black magic? David Icke also talks at length on the potential control system that exists between the moon and Saturn, and these planetary bodies not acting as perceived, and can play a pivotal role in the creation of illusion which we were all a part of. He's dubbed this the perception deception, to limit the act of self, and control humanity purely via the five senses, into believing and co-creating an illusion. In conclusion, there are, as we have seen, many deeply polarizing ideas and understanding of what the moon is and how it affects us on a biological and spiritual level. There is plenty of evidence on both sides. Is the moon a pathogenic soul trap which causes humans pain and suffering and locks us into a false reality and broken reincarnation cycle? Or is the moon the fundamental reason why life is so balanced on Earth, brought in as a Noah's Ark to seed life and create unimaginable biological abundance on this planet, with the full moon cycles working in harmony with us spiritually to release drama and pain as our souls grow and develop, understanding duality and love that is built into our 3D reality? From my own point of view and personal experience, the recent solstice in 2019, I had a very powerful spiritual energetic experience, which didn't feel negative at all, and was a release from previous pain and drama that has lasted ever since. To think, in the night sky, if you look at the lunar surface, is there more to the moon than we're being told? It's hard to even fathom what mystery this planetary body harbours. But for now, we can only theorise and wonder, will one day this mystery be revealed to us all?